to say anything, probably I should have asked you first, but is there anything that...
I'd like to follow up on streets and improvement, if I may.
Good.
Is that all right? I asked John if we could include these two items as part of the budget, because it always is discussed as part of our budget items, and that's, of course, the condition of our streets and our need for equipment. And the handout that I'm distributing contains two things. It contains the information which is dated, which means it's not current, that was used for the last round of street improvement. The other side shows tax revenue generated scenarios. But before I talk about the scenarios on that list, I have consulted with Miller Canfield and others, because after evaluating it, it seems to me we have pretty limited options regarding local street enhancement. I talked with Linda before the meeting, and I think everyone remembers a presentation I made a couple of years ago about grant funding for local streets. Cities of a certain population, i.e. or e.g., Ironwood, qualify for that. Cities like Wakefield and Bessemer and other small communities work through a regional organization, and in fact, an example of a project like that is the Moore Street project that was done a few years ago. But it's unlikely for us to generate some type of grant, and there are occasionally unusual situations like the Johnson Road, which is a local street in federal stimulus dollars because it's a quote-unquote rural connection. So it seems unlikely to me that that scenario is going to generate adequate dollars for any type of significant project. The other thing I talked with some of the council people about is maybe looking at some type of interfund loan wherein we could address some street issues. Not only do I think that's probably not a prudent thing to do in this fiscal environment, I don't think that's going to generate very significant dollars either. So ultimately, I think we might want to look at some type of voted millage. I think council is aware that our operational millage is limited to 20 mills. Right now, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, we're about 17.5 plus. In my conversations with Miller Canfield, they commented, and I agree, that that's really our rainy day fund. I mean, if we hit a hard patch, I mean, those 2 mills represent revenue that we have not yet, that we aren't getting right now, but we could get in the future. But once we use them up and we're at our 20 mil limit, that's it. Voted debt millage is not subject to the operational limit. And there's 2 ways to approach that voted debt. You could vote to levy a couple mills, 1 mill, 2 mills, 3 mills. Or you can vote on a specific bond issue, wherein the precise amount of the project is taken to the people, is voted on, and then the necessary millage is levied. So you're voting on a project, on a bond issue, for a specific amount of money, and that vote can authorize you to levy the taxes necessary to pay the principal and interest on that debt. As I indicated, that debt's not subject to the operational 20 mil limitation. It also allows for the sale of bonds on an unlimited versus limited basis, which makes it much more attractive to investors because the city's full faith and credit is pledged, which is an asset. I don't want to get too technical, but council has to vote 70 days before the election. We have to work closely with the bond council and others in terms of putting together the ballot language. It will take a lot of work to put together the size and scope of a potential project. There are treasury approvals required. And it's been my experience with these projects, and I have done projects like this in the past, that it's really careful to dot every I, cross every T, work with the professional consultants that you need to work with to make sure that you have a successful project and that the real The other thing to consider, if we look at that approach, is we're probably not very attractive on the bond market just because we're small and because a lot of municipalities in the state of Michigan are struggling. That's not a reflection on us. That's just a reflection of the reality that we have to deal with. So we would probably, although not necessarily, we would probably want to look at placing a potential bond sale privately, as we did with, for instance, the fire truck, as we did, for instance, with the DDA light removal project. I'm not saying that's for sure, and there are ways to reinsure a bond, and I'm not an expert on that, but there are ways to take it to the market. But I think in all likelihood, we're probably looking at a private placement, and that may in fact affect the amount that you can bond for. Just to give you an idea, and we don't need to, what I wanted to do was just raise this issue tonight so council will start to think and consider the issue, and then as we go through this spring, we can come back to it and start to define what we wanted to do. But I know we've talked about it a lot. I know you wanted some more information, and that's why I raised it as part of the budget process. The tax-generated revenue, I'm sure the press wants this. Just to give you an idea, Jim has run some numbers. It gives you revenue that would be created by a levy of 2 mills and a levy of 3 mills. It shows you in 5-year increments what kind of revenue would be generated. That goes from 1 year of $84,000 for a 3 mill levy to a cumulative capture of almost $1.5 million at the end of 15 years. And then you see the corresponding numbers for the 2 mills. At the bottom, and believe me, if we move forward with a project of this nature, this paper will seem very rudimentary. But at the bottom, just to give you some sense, you can see, and then Jim, maybe I'm going to let you handle it. Can you explain how you handle those numbers? Just the debt scenario.
Yeah. On the bottom there, where you see like right-hand, the most right-hand column is on a 3 mill levy. So if you decide to do three mills for 5 years, you could do a project roughly of $390,000. So to borrow that $380,000 would take about $439,000 to pay back. Is that meeting the interest? So for 15 years, if you could borrow $1,050,000 over the 15-year life, and it would cost about $1.46 million to pay that back. And those are pretty rough numbers, but just to give you an idea.
Those are very preliminary, but they do give you some sense of the playing field. And there's a ton of policy issues for council to consider, and you want to consider whether it's something you even want to consider. You could simply have some voted millage and do 1 or 2 streets a year, or we could look at a more comprehensive approach. My first inclination was that I looked at the 439 and I thought that's not too bad. That's over twice what we spent on the last paving cycle. Well over twice what we spent on the last paving cycle. But the other thing I thought of, the more I looked at the scenario, was that if we can't design and construct streets that don't last 15 years, then we've got a problem. And then I saw the $1.4 million, and I thought, well, that's not bad. No, that's some serious street work. But I don't even know that there are all kinds of formulas that these things, debt to revenue ratios that have to be run. That's what you have bond counsel and accountants for. So these things are all subject to that. But I don't want to belabor, but council asked for the information, asked for me to research it, and to the best of my ability, or best of my analysis, this is probably, in some fashion or another, your best bet for street work. And if you want, Mr. Mayor, I can continue to bring this back, and I'd be happy to meet with council on an individual